Okay. Good evening. Welcome to our Torah Tuesday. Thank you very much for being here. Let's see. My name is Jerry Watkins, and we're going to look at some Torah tonight. Let's see, just to kind of review where we are and what we're doing. We've been going through the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible from Genesis through Deuteronomy. And they've been studied on a weekly basis in synagogues and churches, for that matter, for years and years. And they've actually divided the Torah up into 54 portions. The Hebrew word for portions that they use is parashah. And if you do a portion a week, more or less, you can go through the entire Torah in a year. And we've done that. I've done that many times. And one of the things you find is that you have to move right along, because to get all that scripture read in a year and discussed is a pretty big task. And a lot of times you end up in a portion and your time is up and you think, well, I have some more things we need to talk about or I want to talk about, and you have to go on. And the next week you have to pick up the new one. You can't go back to where you were. So we decided that we would modify that a little bit, and we'd start at the beginning. And we'd go through and we would do as much as we could do in the hour and a half that we have set. And at the end of that time, we'd stop, and the next week we'd just pick up where we left off. Wow, more new meat. Anyway, so that's what we've done. And we started Genesis, several weeks ago. And we're now in Genesis chapter 34, essentially. Genesis chapter 34. So we've been, by the time you get to Genesis, you're dealing with the main character of the entire book of Genesis, is who, believe it or not, is Jacob, or Israel, as God changed his name to Israel. So who knows what Israel translates into? I always like to ask questions, especially since there's somebody to answer. What's Israel mean?
Did we pray? That's what Israel means.
He always does this. He reminds me that we're supposed to pray first, because I always forget. So, let me pray. Father God, thank you for the evening. Thank you for your word. Thank you for this group of people that has decided it's a good use of their time to come out and study your word together. And I'd ask that you'd bless us for that. I'd ask that you'd bless our conversation, and that you quicken our minds and our hearts to hear what you have for us, because I know you have something unique for each of us. And I ask that you just be alert to hear what it is that you have to say to us. In Yeshua's name, amen. Thank you, John, for being on the ball. Now then, do you know what Israel translates into? You had time to look it up, didn't you? No, you know.
Man wrestling with God?
Yeah. He who struggles with God. Man wrestling with God is what Israel means. Anyway, so we're dealing with Israel, or Jacob, in all his life, and we have gone through the fateful decision that he made when he decided to pretend to be Esau so that he could steal the blessing that rightly belonged to Esau, because Esau was the eldest. And he did that, and his whole life took a hard left turn, and he's been paying for it ever since. He had to run to escape the wrath of his brother to his uncle Laban's house, where he arrived with nothing and worked for one of Laban's daughters, Rachel, he thought, for 7 years. Found out that Laban had kind of pulled a switcheroo on him, and Rachel turned out to be Leah, and he says, that's okay, you can work another 7 for Rachel, which he did. Anyway, we've gone through the period of all of that. It was about 20 years that he spent with Laban, and he got wealthy in terms of sheep and camels and donkeys and all that kind of stuff. And so he left, and he went to go back home. He hadn't been back home in that entire 20-year time, and he wanted to go back. We're going to talk a little about that tonight. But on his way back, first thing he had to do was meet up with Esau, who swore up and down that when he saw him next, he was going to kill him. Turned out that didn't happen, but it was a kind of an interesting meeting, and we talked about that last week, about Jacob's meeting with Esau. And we at the end of the meeting, when it would appear superficially that they had kind of buried the hatchet a little bit, Esau invited Jacob to come down and visit him in Seir. So this is why I have the map up here. Let's see. Let's go do that. This meeting occurred, here, let me get a better version of the map. This meeting occurred this is the Jabbok River right here. See, for those of you that are kind of misoriented or whatever, this is the Mediterranean. Here's the Sea of Galilee, and here's the Dead Sea. And the Jabbok River flows basically east to west into the Dead Sea, or the Jordan Valley, and then drains into the Dead Sea. So Jacob and his family and all his sheep and everything were camped out here. And Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men, he found out. And Jacob was scared, to say the least. And he didn't know, like I say, last time he had seen his brother Esau threatened to kill him. Anyway, so they met together in kind of a tense situation, and it would appear that Esau had kind of let bygones be bygones and was fairly friendly to Jacob. But there's some undercurrents in the text that make you kind of wonder. And we talked about those. I want to repeat that. But at the end of their little meeting, Esau says, well, okay, let's ride together and we'll go down from Jabbok to where I live, which is down in Seir. Seir, let's see if I can go back to this other one. Seir is down here a little farther. Seir is another name for Petra. It's at the kind of the southeast corner of the Dead Sea. And that's where Esau lived. So when Esau suggested they ride together, Jacob says, well, no, I got little kids and I got little sheep and stuff, and they'll all croak if we try to move too fast. So why don't you go on without us, and we'll catch up. And Esau says, well, how about if I leave some of these 400 men that are just kind of with me, and they can go with you? And Jacob says, no, we don't need 400 men. You go on without us, and we'll arrive there when we can. And so as soon as Esau and all his family, all his men kind of head off south, Jacob basically goes west. He doesn't follow, he goes west. Now, a couple thoughts about that. He could have gone west just because, well, I don't want to go south because I really don't want to be that close to Esau. Another reason that he wanted to go west was that he was headed back to where God had first met him, or last met him, not last, first met him. And where God first met him was down here at Bethel. So to get to Bethel, you have to cross the Jordan River and go down like that. So still no conclusive evidence. But anyway, he comes over here and he stops at Shechem. And we have recorded that he bought, this is chapter 33, verse 19. Well, let's see, 18. It says, after Jacob came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. And there he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel. So this is the second recorded purchase of a plot of ground in Genesis. Does anybody remember where the first plot of ground was that was purchased? Beg your pardon? Abraham. Abraham bought the cave and the field at Machpelah. And that was their family tomb. That's where he buried his wife Sarah. That's where Abraham was buried. And that has, to this day, that's still a monument, if you will. They built a big thing around it like they typically do. But it's in Hebron. And while Hebron is technically a Palestinian ruled city, that enclave is called Kirjath Arba, and that's where they have a Shiva and things like that, and that's still a Jewish monument, if you will. So the cave at Machpelah still exists. Now this plot of land here that's referred to, this bunch of land, I wanted to do this because we hadn't really talked about it before. When we get to Joshua, which we won't get to because it's not in the Torah. If you were to go on after the book of Deuteronomy and read Joshua, in Joshua, the exact address is chapter 24, verse 32, you would read where the Israelites, after they crossed the Jordan River, had brought with them out of Egypt Joseph's bones. They brought Joseph's remains with them, and Joseph was buried at a tomb in Shechem on this piece of land. Okay? That tomb still exists. Matter of fact, as recently as 2015, it made the news because, again, Shechem, for whatever reason, is a Palestinian-controlled city, and a bunch of Muslims got, Arabs, Palestinians got excited about, I don't know what, but they desecrated Joseph's tomb. So Joseph's tomb has been desecrated and was, knocked down and spray painted, I don't know what all. But that was back in 2015. I haven't read any more about it since then, but I never can help but be amazed at the fact that us, reading the paper about Joseph's tomb being desecrated in the city's name is now Nablus, and yet you can read about it in this book here that's clearly at least 2,000, probably 3,500 years old, about an event that happened 3,500 or 4,000 years ago. And yet you can find the place on the map, right here, that the event occurred. That just blows me away. It's just, my favorite phrase, it's not like this is Narnia or something. This really exists, and you can really go over to these places. I've been to Shechem, and there's lots of stuff that happens at Shechem. So I just thought that was interesting. What else do I want to say? I guess that's about all. So that was kind of a review. No, that's not a review, because we went through the what happened at Shechem. The daughter of Jacob, Jacob might have had lots of daughters. We don't really know. But the only daughter that was named in the Torah is Dinah, who was a daughter of Leah. And she was, this chapter 34 tells the story of Dinah and how she was violated, raped by the son of the king of Shechem, and how Shechem's son he fell in love with Dinah and wanted to marry her. So he had his dad go negotiate with Jacob for the hand of Dinah, and it shows a little. It shows a little of the dysfunctionality of the family, because they were discussing, how this might occur, and the sons, Jacob's eldest sons, who at this point were probably in their late teens or middle 20s or something like that, were really upset because Dinah was their sister. It wasn't even their half-sister, it was their sister. And they were mad that she had been violated, and they really they had vengeance in their heart, if you will. And so they came up with this plan, and there's no record that they discussed the plan with their dad, Jacob, but they told the king of Shechem that, they'd give, what he suggested was, why don't you go ahead and settle down here in this land that you bought for me, and, your sons can marry our daughters, and our sons can marry your daughters, and we'll just live together, have one big happy family. And the son says, well, that's all right idea, but we couldn't agree to do that unless all the males in your town agreed to be circumcised, because that's the way it's done in our culture. So you'd have to do that. So this is always one of my favorite parts. Is somehow or another, Shechem and his dad Hamor go back and talk all the men in the town into doing this. They said, this will be great, man. You'll have access to their daughters, and won't all their sheep and stuff be yours? This will just be the best thing that ever happened. So they agreed to do that, and so they were all circumcised. And then while they were in pain, if you will, Jacob's sons, led primarily by Simeon and Levi, went in and just massacred the town. Just took, they killed all the men and captured the women and the children and made slaves out of them and burnt the whole place down. And it was pretty savage thing to do. And it's clear that Jacob wasn't in the know on this, because in verse 30, at the end of chapter 34, it says, then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Shouldn't he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" So that shows a couple of things, if you ask me. It shows that clearly there was, there's hatred in the heart of Levi and Simeon. They didn't have any intention of forgiving or getting along with these people. This was all a big effort to be able to go kill them. But it also shows that Jacob didn't know what they were planning. Jacob was surprised by this. So it wasn't like this was some big family plot. But that says that there wasn't the world's best communication between those four brothers, the four brothers being Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, and Jacob, and that makes you say to yourself, I wonder why. And then you realize, of course, that those were the four sons of Leah who spent her whole life trying to get Jacob to love her and was jealous of her sister Rachel, who, while Jacob clearly loved her and made no bones about it, Rachel couldn't bear children. So what a great family life to live in, If you think your family was dysfunctional, you'd have a hard time beating this one. And that's just not part of it. That's just part of it. That's not all of it. So I think it's important. I don't know. I just get a lot out of that because, number one, it's really a good example of how not to do things. And yet here he is, Israel, God changes his name to, Israel, the guy that's really responsible for God's plan in the earth. And not only is he a human being, he's not even that good a one. He's got all the mistakes and all the foibles that we have and more. I mean, it's not hard to look at Jacob and say, Jacob, way back when your mom suggested that you go into Isaac and pretend to be Esau, you probably should have told her no, right? Anyway, I think it's important to think about that as you go through this stuff, because the Bible's the only book where the heroes are shown in all their frailty as opposed to their perfection. Because, and it's fun to sit there and think about, so what is there about Jacob that God valued? Why would God favor him over a lot of other people that are bound to be better than Jacob? So you can think about that. We'll go on. So anyway, that's where we left off. 17 whole minutes I wasted telling about what we did, but I thought it was important. Chapter 35. If anybody has any comments or questions, we can do that. What? Wait just a second. We got to get you a microphone. If we do a microphone, then other people can hear you.
All of this happened before Joseph was born?
No, Joseph was probably born at this time. No, I'm wrong. No, Joseph was born. It was Benjamin that was not born yet.
Okay.
I apologize. Joseph was the last son born. Okay? So he was probably, I don't know, he's probably 6 or 8, but probably not 15. So he was a young boy. You have a question? No? Okay. Okay, we'll do chapter 35. So, after the little disagreement between Jacob and his sons, chapter 45 says, Then God said to Jacob, Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Get rid of the foreign gods that you have with you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothes. And then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods that they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. And then they set out, and the terror of God fell upon the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. So let's see if I want to go. Yeah, I'll go another paragraph. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is, Bethel, in the land of Canaan. And there he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, which is God, the house of God, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Okay, let's talk about a lot of stuff there. So God told Jacob to go up to Bethel, and he said, build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother. So when was the last time that Jacob was in Bethel? By the way, Bethel is right here. So it's not far from where he would met Esau, and it's not far from Shechem. It's literally probably not more than a day's walk between Shechem and Bethel. So when was the last time that Jacob was in Bethel?
When he left his house.
Yeah, when he left home. When his mom basically said, you need to leave or elsewise your brother, who is really, really furious, was going to clean your clock. So he left and he went to Bethel. What happened at Bethel?
The stairway to heaven?
Yeah. He slept. We talked about, there's a story about why he didn't have his dowry with him, but he slept and he had a rock for a pillow. And during the night he dreamed. And he dreamed about this stairway with angels ascending and descending. And he woke up the next day and he was so impressed that he says, this is clearly the house of God. So that's why I call it Bethel, house of God. And he made this vow to God. God had promised him, says, I'll take care of you. I'll go with you where you go, and I'll take care of you, and I'll bring you back to this very spot, which is what is happening right here. And
So
go ahead.
my question is, I don't know if there's anything else like this, that God said unto Jacob, blah, 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 and make there an altar unto God.
So God says, make an altar,
Make an
unto
altar
God.
unto me, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Kind of a
that's not
strange
that
wording.
common or what.
Yeah, don't know. I was going to ask, does anybody know anything else that happened at Bethel?
He promised a tithe.
Oh, yeah. The promise that, the vow that Jacob made was, we talked about this. He said basically, God, if you will be with me and you will protect me as I go on this journey and you will bring me back to this very spot, then I will give to you a tenth of everything that I gain while I'm out on this trip. A lot of people, when you read it, it looks kind of like a bargain, kind of like Jacob is bargaining with God. But that's not what happened at all, because basically God said, I'm going to do this. And what Jacob said was, if you really do this, like you said you'd do this, then I'll give you a tenth of everything that you bless me with. And so that's what he did. What else happened at Bethel? This would be hard if you didn't get it. But if you went back and looked at Genesis chapter 12 or Genesis chapter 13, you'd see that Bethel is the place where God met Abraham. This is where God made, Genesis chapter 12 is a chapter you just ought to remember. The first 4 verses of Genesis chapter 12 are, well, let's go back and look. Since I can't quote it, I'm not that good. But you'll recognize it. The Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land that I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. And I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. That has been mentioned to me as basically the theme of the entire Bible. That those 2 verses right there. And so that happened at Bethel. So Bethel is a pretty popular place for God, if you will.
Does it say that here in the chapter? That
I beg your pardon?
Does it say that? Did you read?
Yep. Okay, let me go. Yes, it does. I can. Are you asking? Are you doubting whether that really happened?
Oh, I'm not. It's for everybody else.
It's in verse 8.
Verse 8.
Verse 8. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent. with Bethel west and Ai on the east. And he built an altar and he called the name of the Lord. So from there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel, implied to be that he was in Bethel. But I have another one here. If you don't like that one, we can go to the next verse over, chapter 13, verse 3. He went on to the Negev in between here and says, verse 3 says, from the Negev he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier and where he first built an altar. Okay, so that's the place.
I knew.
You knew that. You were just seeing if I knew. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'll fail one of those for sure. So let's see. In back to the story here. So Jacob says to his household who were with him, I'm in verse 2 of chapter 35, get rid of all the foreign gods you have with you, purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come and let us go up to Bethel where I will build an altar to God. So let's talk about these foreign gods that you have with you. He's talking to his household. Who do we know that definitely has some foreign gods with them? Rachel, remember before Rachel left, she stole her father's household gods. But I was thinking about that. This is a group of fair number of people, all of which were, the vast majority of which were probably born and raised back there where Laban lived in Haran. And so they would all be from the culture and society that had the pagan gods that were common back in that area at that time. And so there's probably, while this is clearly makes us think of Rachel because of the story we've read earlier, he's talking to all of them. All of them probably have some little icons or amulets or whatever, and he's basically saying, get rid of all that stuff. Get rid of all the foreign gods you have with you. Purify yourselves. Change your clothes. I guess that's just basically wash. Marvin.
Well, John just handed me the mic, but I do have a question.
Okay, I'm glad.
Do they ever reuse these altars? Because
Yeah.
did Abraham, did he build two altars, or did he use the same one at Bethel?
That's a good question in general, but it's my opinion that he probably used the same one.
And then-
Now, it may not have been in the same condition that he used it in the first time.
Right. He may have had to rebuild it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting he told him to go build an altar
Yeah.
and send him to Bethel because there's already been an altar to God built there.
Yeah, but these kind of altars, the kind that this set of people
Right,
built,
the rocks.
yeah, they're
just a bunch
rocks.
of
They're undressed
Pile of-
stones, or just kind of just a pile of rocks. You could come out almost anywhere around here and see a pile of rocks and say, "Oh, I bet that's an altar." I mean, it's kind of that. And so they would have a tendency to get knocked down, and certainly it could be neatened up. Might want to pull a weed or two.
Right.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
Okay. Says, verse 4, so they gave Jacob and all the foreign gods they had and the rings in their ears. I think that's a funny thing to stick in there, but evidently that had something to do with the pagan worship. And Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell upon the towns around them, so that no one pursued them. So what do you suppose is meant by that? What just happened in the chapter before?
Well, they wiped out the city of Shechem,
Yeah,
is
they
what
wiped
they
out
did.
the city of Shechem, and Jacob, being the fearful guy that he is, basically said, well, heck, all these towns around here are going to hear about that, and they're going to join forces, and we're not all that strong, and they're numerous, they're just going to come wipe us out. And so it says, the terror of God fell upon the towns that all around them, so that no one pursued them. So basically, God protected them. God made, you could easily see the rumor going around, says, this one shepherd and his family just wiped out this whole town. Man, those guys must be supermen or something. Don't touch them. Let them have whatever they want, leave them alone. So I think that's what that's referring to. John?
Yeah, or they're crazy.
Yeah, they're crazy, yeah. Yeah.
So, well, what's interesting is we just read it in chapter 12 about mentioning Bethel.
Mm-hmm.
It's in that chapter where it says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, which to me implies They need to interact with people. How all the world would be blessed because of this interaction, but there isn't any interaction now because they all think they're lunatic. They're all bloodthirsty lunatics.
Yep, good point. How can there be interaction with this group if everybody's scared to death of them? Yep, that's a good point. So, moving on, verse 6. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was from there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother, and we had talked about that. Okay, now here's an intriguing verse that we can go piddle around with for as long as we want. Verse 8. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak below Bethel, and so the place was named Alon Bakuth. Alon Bakuth means oak or tree of weeping. Who's Deborah? Well, obvious answer. Rebekah's nurse, right? Well, what do we know about Rebekah's nurse? Not a lot, it turns out. Not much at all. But the first thing to do is to probably figure out, I tell you what, if you look up Rebekah in the concordance, Deborah in the concordance, you find this verse first, and then you find lots of verses about the Deborah who lived in the time of Judges. But you don't find anything previous to this verse about Deborah. However, if you go back to Genesis 24, Genesis 24 is where, this was a fun chapter. It's where Eleazar, it's where Abraham sends Eleazar back to get a wife for Isaac. And it's a great chapter to read about Eleazar and all that he did, And so he miraculously finds this girl named Rebekah who offered to water all his camels and all this kind of stuff. And he makes this plea to Laban, her brother, and Bethuel, her father, that he's looking for a wife for the son of his master, and he wants to buy her and take her back to her new husband if she should choose to. And they say basically, okay, great, look at all the neat stuff you bought us. We're up for that. But then later on, let's see if I can find the right spot. It's verse 54. I'll start in verse 54. Then he, Eleazar, and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they got up the next morning, he said, "Send me on my way to my master." But her brother, Laban, and her mother replied, "Let the girl remain with us 10 days or so, and then you may go." We talked a lot about that and what that might mean. But he said to them, "Do not detain me now, now that Yahweh has granted success to my journey. Send me on my way so that I may go to my master." And so they said, "Let's call the girl and ask her about it." And so they called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with him and with this man?" And she says, "I will go." And so, verse 59, you're exactly right. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. So that's Deborah. Okay? That's Rebekah's nurse. Now, there's been a lot of, I spent a good 30 minutes tracking this down, trying to figure out what was going on here, which, I hate to say it, but the internet makes this really kind of fun. The word nurse is part of the issue here. It's got, the Hebrew word has got a connotation with it that also means instructor or teacher. So while you think it's maybe, it could be a wet nurse or it could be just some sort of a family physician or something, it's more than likely more than that. It was more than likely a teacher and a companion to Rebekah as she was growing up. And so she had probably developed quite a close relationship with Rebekah. So you become kind of house. Well, much like Eleazar became pretty much a member of Abraham's household, even though he wasn't related, this nurse Deborah probably became a member of Rebekah's household, even though she wasn't really a relation. Anyway, Rebekah and her nurse Deborah went together back to live with Isaac. Not a long time ago, right? That's before Jacob was ever even thought of, right? So we have over here then now going back to verse 35, poor old Deborah dies, right? There's a fair amount of controversy about, well, is that even the same Deborah? I mean, that's a number of years. And then she'd be definitely elderly. But it's not impossible that it could be the same Deborah. Another thing was that these are some of the hypotheses that come up. When Jacob had been up at Laban's household in Haran for long enough, 20 years, Rebekah back home kind of figured out that Esau was over being mad. And so she sent word to Jacob telling him it was okay for him to come home. And the way she sent word was with Rebekah. She took her 90-year-old tutor nurse and says, why don't you go up back to Haran and find my son Jacob, whom you probably know because you were around when I had him. Go up and find Jacob and tell him it's okay for him to come back. And so that's why Deborah was with Jacob at this time. That's one hypothesis. There's not a shred of scripture to support that, but that's one. Let's see. Another one is that the communication between Jacob and Rebekah might have been more common than we thought. I mean, there's no record of any communication between Jacob and his mother, Rebekah, after the day he left, the night he left. So this is all made up too. But the idea is that when Jacob starts having kids, and seems to be very good at it, by the way, Rebekah finds out about this and says, you know what you need? You need this really good nurse that I've had all my life. So I'm going to send her up there with you so he can help you raise your kids the way you should. And so that's how she got up there. Neither one of those, if you ask me, are very, neither one of them are supportable, but both of them are somewhat plausible. But anyway, the thing that's interesting is here we have this out of the world, or out of left field phrase. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak below Bethel. Okay, but it says, so it was named Alon Bakuth, which is oak of weeping. So Jacob evidently knew her well enough to weep her mourning or weep her passing, right? So, and she would have known Jacob because she would have been around when Rebekah had him. And so she might very well have been an integral part of Jacob's life as a boy. Anyway, that's all for your thought. Anybody got any thoughts about that? Any better explanations of who Deborah is and what she's doing there?
I looked up nursing.
Mm-hmm.
You said that might have had a different than just suckling, or
Yep.
In the King James, they didn't have. Basically, that was it. But
That was it, huh?
I don't know what.
You don't know what, I don't remember where I read that. I mean, it was somewhere on the internet. Could have been some guy that didn't know anything, but
I'm not saying it wasn't.
yeah. Well, if it wasn't something more than that, then why would Rebekah, who was probably well past the suckling age, take her nurse with her when she was going to get married? A lot of people like to think that the fact that her nurse went with her was an implication that she was only like 3 years old, which I find absurd. I just can't buy that.
Oh, I've heard
one.
that. Yeah, that's great.
I can't buy that one. So I think somehow or another, whether the word nurse is the proper word, I think this character, Deborah, was a more integral part of the family than we have enough information to determine.
Deborah means bee.
It means bee, yes. Anyway, it's fun to think about. It's interesting because the Bible supports this looking around. It doesn't support you, designing entire new sects and organizational religions based on it. But it's okay to think about this. It's okay to ask yourself. Just don't base your salvation on it. But the thing that's interesting is these things usually hold together. The fact that we can actually find one other reference to Rebekah's nurse, even though the name Deborah is not given to her, and that it could be this person. There's no other reason to have this entry here. Someday, when we get there, we'll find out. We'll find out why this is here. Anyway, moving on to verse 9. After Jacob returned from Padan Aram, that's Syria, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. And God said to him, I am God Almighty, El Shaddai. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will come from your body. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I also give to you. And I will give you this land to your descendants after you. And then God went up from him at the place where he had talked to him. Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked to him, and he poured out a drink offering on it, and he also poured oil on it. Jacob called the place where God had talked with him Bethel. Yes.
So back to the Deborah mystery.
Oh, good. You found something more interesting?
Well, I'm throwing out a theory here.
Okay.
I'm wondering if there's a chiastic structure because later on, Rachel dies. Next paragraph.
Yep.
So you have two deaths, which would be a
Two deaths right together.
connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That could be. That could be. Do you find anything interesting about verses 11 through 13?
11. Well, I got a question on 11.
Okay.
When you closely read what's there, I am the sovereign God, be fruitful and multiply. A nation, even a company of nations, multiple nations, will descend from you. Kings will be among your descendants.
Yep.
So there's plural on nations
Yep.
and descendants.
Yep.
Do you think that carries over into the European kingdom?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I think another reference to it would be a nation will come from you. That, to me, is Jews, Israel, okay? A king or a company of nations, a community of nations, to me, refers to the scattered, the dispersed northern kingdom of Israel, which is out there in all the nations of the world. So that's what I think it's referring to. Is that what you were referring to?
Well, as being more specific, I mean, you've got the royal families of Europe.
Yes.
Do you think they're part of this deal? Do you think, because I have read, I don't know, I haven't studied it, but they think they were anointed by God to be the kings and queens of Europe.
Sure.
And
sure.
so I just wonder, we don't know, but it's
we-
interesting because he's using plurals on all this.
Yep. But it's definitely the case that he's talking about something outside of the kingdom of Israel. That is the other nations. Yeah.
Well, that's possible. That's the reasonable thing. But, king can also mean sovereign.
Yes.
And so before 1 Samuel chapter 8, where all these kings in Europe and places like that make the claim that they have, what is it
Divine
called?
right.
Divine right of kingship, whatever. Before that, they didn't have it wasn't, you were essentially the king. The individual, certainly the head of the family was the king or whatever. God was your king.
Yeah.
And so, and this is way, way before 1 Samuel chapter 8.
Yes. Yep. You're right. Of course, I think it's interesting that he says very specific. He says, the land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you. And I'll give this land to your descendants after you. So he's basically confirming the fact that Jacob now has the covenant that he had promised to his father and to his grandfather. So if you ask me, it basically confirms the fact that even though Jacob pretty much stole the blessing from his brother Esau, that God's given it to him. I mean, you could even say God had it planned this way from the start, but that gets us on another discussion. John, you have anything?
Well, yeah. Is this the blessing or is this a prophecy? I mean, how is he individually blessed? I guess he's blessed through the genealogy that he will live remembered for who he is, and in that sense, he's blessed.
Well, I don't know.
I'm thinking more
the
physical
land I
things.
gave to Abraham, I give to you.
Well, the land, that's definitely a blessing.
That's a big blessing to me.
I was thinking of the genealogy, I guess.
Yeah, well, the genealogy is there too. I mean, we talk about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So, let's see.
If anybody has a question, just raise their hand. We'll
Yep.
send the mic over there.
Okay, so all of this happened down here. So we'll move on a little bit here. Chapter 35, verse 16. Then they moved on from Bethel. While they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't be afraid, you will have another son." As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrows. But his father named him Benjamin, which is son of my right hand. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day, that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal-Eder. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Dysfunctionality rises again. Okay, let's stop there and let's talk about that. So, moves on from Bethel and is on his way to, well, he's gone on his way south because where he's headed down to Hebron. He wants to go back. Hebron's down here. He's headed home, essentially. So he goes from Bethel and he's headed south. And on his way to Bethlehem there's a town down there called Ephrath. I've seen it. You can drive to it. Okay. And that's when Rachel decided to have her give birth, and she died. I remember our first trip to Israel. We were on a tour bus that went from Bethlehem, or from Jerusalem down to Bethlehem, and on the road down there, I don't think they do this anymore, but they stopped, and there's this little kind of adobe-looking hut that's Rachel's tomb. It's still there, unless something's happened to it since in the past 30 years, but I mean, it was there 30 years ago. Now, you could argue, is that really, really Rachel or not? But certainly it's the right spot for it. So, Marvin.
What was the custom back then when someone died? I mean, did they have to bury him before sundown?
I don't know if it was before sundown, but it was real
quick.
soon. Yeah.
So that explains why he didn't take her to the burial grounds of everybody else.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, if he had wanted to, because we're going to run into cases where that was the case, then I don't know how they would have exactly done this. This was kind of after Egypt, but they would have put her in something so that over time the only thing would be left with her bones, and they would put her bones in that place. But I think in this case it's exactly as you say. Nobody wanted to. I mean, certainly they didn't have the Egyptian techniques of embalming and all that stuff. So I'm sure they just put her in the ground. So there's obviously some significance to the fact that she named her son Ben-Oni. Let's see, did I get that right in terms of what that means? Son of my trouble is what this says. But her husband overrode her and says, it's not son of my trouble, it's
Jerry,
son of my right hand. Yes.
I just want to make a comment. It's real interesting. I mean, the significance that she played in Jacob's life. He buried her and went on. I mean, it doesn't talk about him being sad or anything.
Well, it will. And the truth of the matter is...
It doesn't here.
No, it does not here.
I have a comment on just a little bit different topic. This section here talks about Jacob, only he's referred to as Israel. And I've heard a few teachings in the past. I mean, it wafts back and forth as we go on. And whenever Israel is mentioned as his name, then I'm asking what significance that has. Is that some prophetic significance?
Well, the theory is, and I've never been able to make it work consistently, but the theory is whenever it's Jacob, it's the guy, it's the person.
Right.
Whenever it's Israel, it's prophetic about the nation of Israel's future. But you have to be able to read the story to know what the elements, I mean, it's an allegory or I don't know what, a vision or something. So you have to realize who the characters are and what they're actually talking about. And you know the way that stuff is when somebody tells you what it means in the face of some historical thing that you already know about, you can say, oh, I get that. But on the other hand, this stuff might be prophetic about things that haven't happened yet. So whenever I know there is purportedly and probably some significance to when they use the word Israel and when they use the word Jacob. But I have yet to really figure out what it is. Maybe those of you that can study it a little more consistently might.
So along those lines, like it says in verse 10 of this chapter,
Yes.
and Jehovah said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name.
Yep.
And he called his name Israel. So it's worth repeating, I guess.
Yeah.
Because when they had the wrestling match,
Yes, yeah, this is the second time he got his name changed.
to
Luckily,
the same name.
To the same name, yeah. Sometimes they do that. God promised Abraham the land of Canaan twice. So a lot of times these things get repeated. I think my feeling is the reason they get repeated is in case one gets dropped off due to translation errors, or in case some fragment of scroll somewhere disappears. If God thinks it's important, it's usually in here more than once. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking out loud here, but I don't like that idea where they just
Okay.
sort of make things
That's
up.
okay.
Did he kind of like defile his name by his interaction with Shechem, and he had to reestablish it again, and he had to get rid of his idols? And
I don't think so. Maybe, but why would you think that would be?
well, I'm asking, why are we,
Why is he doing it
deja
again?
vu all over again? Why are we doing
Well,
this?
okay, so
If there's no idol word in the Torah,
he changed his name to Israel back when he wrestled.
right?
Right.
27.
Okay, so now it is, and he's had everybody get rid of the foreign gods and clean themselves up and get all nice and do a good job, and then God says, okay, now you got your act back together, so I'm repeating myself. Your name's no longer Jacob, your name's Israel. That could be. You could be right. I don't like yours either, so that's right.
I got another one about the midwife related to Deborah, but it's even worse.
Okay. Well, okay, if you want.
Well, I'm just wondering if could Deborah have played the role of the midwife, and that's another connection,
Well,
maybe?
I suppose it could.
Why
but-
is the midwife mentioned? She's just sort of, or this would have to be the backup midwife.
Well,
Like she didn't do her job or something very well.
Deborah dies before.
No, I know. So this is the substitute midwife. Assuming Deborah played the role of the midwife,
Okay.
she just sort of says, well, it wasn't very helpful at doing her job, I guess.
Well, that's
I mean, maybe sometimes you just can't do anything about that, but he just kind of says, well, what does
Oh,
she
well.
say? What verse is that in?
midwife says you're going to have a son. Don't be afraid, for you're going to have another son. And then she dies. I don't know. We don't want to read too much into it. Okay. Moving right along. Verse 21. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Now that's right out of Oedipus Rex, right? Now Bilhah is not his mother, but it's one of the four wives, if you will, that Jacob has. I mean, he's really got two wives and two concubines, but he has relations with all of them, all four of them. So in some sense, all four of them are his wives. So if nothing else, this is to me, it's a real proof text of why polygamy is a dumb idea. Because stuff like this can happen, It also shows that Reuben has not been educated, if you will, or instructed thoroughly in the rules of conduct of a Hebrew, right? Because he would have known that this was the wrong thing to do. Could also be that he was kind of hacked off at his dad and wanted to get back at him. Is that what you're going to say?
Well, I was going to say it was a power play, but
There's a power play, sure. Reuben is the eldest, right? Okay, you want to say something, Marvin? The thing is, again, this is, to me, it shows great insight into the dynamics of the family, right? At least the first 4 sons of Jacob, all by Leah, are irritated. They're unhappy. They don't like the way, they're not happy with their relationship with their dad for some reason. Because we got the mutiny that was plotted by Levi and Simeon, and then we have this. This is probably worse than that. So those first 4 sons, and of course, if you remember, Leah has 2 more sons. So 6 sons of Leah, and these first 4 are clearly, we don't have any confidence, or we don't have any indication of that about Judah. The first 3, let's say. The first 3 of these sons are not satisfied with their relationship with their dad. And the only thing I can say, it's because it must have been obvious that their dad didn't love their mother. He wasn't treating Leah right. His favoritism for Rachel was obvious for all to see, even young boys. That's my hypothesis. You got something?
And I've heard that it's speculated that Leah put him up to it.
That could be. That could very well be.
But I had another comment about it in regard to the prophetic, that Israel's being defiled. So maybe a future thing coming up. But what I don't understand is the very last part. It says, and Israel heard of it. I don't know where to place that in the
Into
the context of the
prophetic
meeting.
thing.
Or even well, if we do it in just the physical there, Jacob, but it was the spiritual Jacob, he knew of the defilement.
Yes.
But I don't know if anything more is spoken of it or not, or if he did anything about it, but he knew of it.
Well, one thing he for sure did about it is he made it no bones about the fact that that's why Reuben was disqualified as being the inheritor, the eldest son inheritor, because of that. So there's at least that, but yeah. Okay. So starting in verse 23, a little before that, well, the main thing, I was going to back it up one second. The main thing, Israel heard of it, is there for, if you ask me, is to make you make sure that at this point you realize that it wasn't a secret. Israel knew about it. Because otherwise it could have been a big dramatic reveal at some point in time when he finds it out. He already found it out. In the same sentence. Anyway, Jacob had 12 sons. The sons of Leah, Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's maidservant Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Leah's maidservant Zilpah, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. In case you didn't know, that's who they are. Padan Aram is Syria, and that's really kind of wrong because Benjamin wasn't born in Syria, but that's neither here nor there. Any thoughts? Nothing there. Verse 27. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So how old was Isaac when he died? 180, it says right there, doesn't it? 180. Now, if you're so inclined, you can go back and calculate how old Isaac was when it says that now Isaac was getting on there and he was having a hard time seeing, and he was old, and he was thinking his days are numbered and his life is about over. And you'll find out that that was like 60 years earlier, a long time earlier. Isaac lived a long time after that. So that's one thing you can learn from this. The other thing you can learn from this is that obviously Esau and Jacob got together one last time. Yeah. So
And lived to tell about it.
and live to tell about it. There are, you have to kind of be careful because just because something is not mentioned doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. So it could have been that that Esau and Jacob got together after he came back from Haran, but in my opinion, it's kind of unlikely. However, when Isaac dies, it's not at all unlikely that the two sons, even though they may not get along that well, came together to bury him. Heck, I see dynamics like that in my own family, So. Yes.
I think part of the reason that it was in here is possibly God is telling us it's important that we get together for these things like funerals, because it seems like some other place in the scripture it talks about going to a funeral is more important than a birth in regard to significance of
Yeah.
life.
That's a fair point. That's a good point. Yeah. Interesting. Well, okay, we'll move on unless there's more questions. This next section gets to be a little tedious, but we're going to wade through it and see how well we do. They have subtitles here in this particular Bible I'm using, and this is called chapter 36 is called Esau's Descendants. So I'll read through it. Go ahead, Marvin.
We're 3 generations into this now.
Yep.
With we know that Isaac and his brother buried Abraham.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we know how long those two families, branches from Abraham, commingled? I mean, we're close to each
But
other.
we know a couple of things about that. All of these are kind of assumptions and inferences.
Right.
But we know that when Eleazar went to get Rebekah for Isaac, that he brought her back to Isaac, who was at Beer Lahai Roy. And Beer Lahai Roy is the place where Hagar had settled with her son Ishmael. So it's highly likely, in my opinion, that Isaac and Ishmael were living near each other after his mother died. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is, it says here, and we're going to go through it in great detail, that just right here in chapter 36, that you remember when Esau, it said a couple of times when we were reading through the adolescence and post and early years of Esau and Jacob, that Esau had married 2 Canaanite wives, and he found out, I like this, he found out that his mom and dad thought that was a terrible idea, and so in order to fix it, he went and married a non-Canaanite wife, and who he married was Oholiab, who was a daughter of Ishmael. So there must have been some interactions between Ishmael and the family, even at that time. In my opinion, there were probably more interactions with Ishmael and his family than there were between Esau and his. But that's just a feeling I have. I don't have any particular data. Sure. So, chapter 36. This is the account of Esau, that is, Edom. Esau took his wives from women of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael and sister of Nebaioth. So I had the names wrong. It was Basemath that is the daughter of Ishmael. It wasn't Oholibamah. But, I'm sure you guys can forgive me for that. Verse 4, Adah bore Eliphaz to Esau, Basemoth bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in Canaan. Esau took his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together. The land where they were staying could not support them because of both of their livestock. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. Now this is kind of an important thing. When would this have happened? When would Esau have taken his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob?
When would it have happened?
Yeah, when would it have happened in Jacob's lifetime? This is easy answer.
When he was in Laban with Laban?
Well, how could it have been when he was with Laban? Because he didn't have, he wouldn't be crowding Esau. It was after that. It was after they returned. That's all I was asking. It might even be after his father. I don't know. It's hard to say it was after his father died, but it was certainly after he returned from Laban.
Well,
because there'd be no way for him to crowd them before then.
right. That's kind of my point is what happened right before this? The death of their fathers. And the next chapter, it talks about the genealogy of Jacob, I believe.
Yeah.
So, these two boys were blessed, whether you may not like, the one may not have liked what he got, but they were both blessed. I think they were both promised land.
Yep.
And so they're, wouldn't be an uncommon thing to go through the genealogy right after the patriarch died.
I agree. 100%.
Okay, that's my only connection to the.
Okay. But that's interesting. Let me go back to the bigger map here. Now, this here, obviously, is the land that the Canaan. This is Canaan. This is the land that God was talking about when he promised it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Seir is over here. Okay? So, somewhere before or after Isaac died, but certainly after Jacob had returned from Laban, they decided, maybe with or without Isaac's help, that Jacob and his people would settle here, and Esau and his people would settle over here. Right?
They decided, or that was told to him, that I don't know if it says it anywhere.
Well, it doesn't say that God told him.
Right.
And it doesn't say that Isaac told him, but Isaac could have.
Right. I guess the bigger question too, when we do the big Exodus, or not the big Exodus, the original Exodus, the sons of Israel meet up with Esau.
Yep.
And
they're coming down the bottom like this and up.
Right. And Jehovah says to them, don't go after your brother.
That's your brother.
Don't go after Esau. He's your brother.
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting that God was okay with them having that land, that was their inheritance.
Yes, I agree that was their inheritance. The thing that kind of gets me going, or that makes my mind kind of question a little bit, is how did Esau and Jacob kind of together decide, well, I'll stay here and you go over there? Certainly the discussion
like
must
Abraham
come up.
and Lot?
Yeah. Certainly the discussion must have come up that the promise that God gave Abraham had now been given to Jacob, and so Jacob needed to be here,
right?
Not Esau.
Right. Because that was decided just a few verses back, or it was endowed or whatever on Jacob that he would get the blessing of
Abraham, yeah.
Back to Abraham.
God did that.
Right.
God did that to Jacob.
But technically this is all, well, I guess the right side or the east side of the Dead Sea isn't Canaan. I don't know. The whole.
No, it's technically it's not. But I guess my point is that it seems, from what I know of Esau, it seems unlikely that he would have just said, okay, fine, I'll take all this land over here, if he hadn't been somehow forced to, by God maybe, or something, because why would he? I mean, maybe he finally just gave up and said, okay, Jacob gets the blessing and I don't. But I don't know. It's something to think about. Yeah.
The two parcels of land you're talking about, from a quality standpoint, are they pretty much the same?
Well, no, this area down in Edom, it pretty much sucks. I'll tell you, it's pretty bad. But up here, it's a little better.
Right.
But this is far superior.
They're not the only ones living on this land we're
No,
talking about.
absolutely,
So I mean,
yeah.
it's not like, God promised it to them, but He didn't give them a deed on it yet.
Yep, that's a very good point.
And so they had to agree to do this for some reason.
Yeah. And I don't know what it is.
Because if God would have told them to do it, you would have thought He would have taken it all and gave it. If He wanted to do it this early in the story, there'd be more to the story, I would think.
Yeah.
So I think it was. I have no idea, but I would assume they agreed to do it.
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
The only thing I can think of is during the 20 years that Jacob was off piddling around in Laban's land, gave Esau plenty of time to think this all through and kind of decide, well, heck, yes, he cheated me, but Dad said, the blessing, I've blessed him, and he's indeed blessed. I can't take it back.
Right.
And so maybe he kind of figured it out and says, well, okay, fine. This land down here is not so bad. I can take all that stuff.
Well, not only that, you don't know what kind of animals or where Esau got all his wealth.
That's true too.
He may not have needed that. Maybe there's something over there that was more valuable to him than that good land. Maybe there was minerals or who knows what.
Well, there was a whole bunch of people over there called the Horites.
Right.
And I think they had something to do with it because I think he married into some of them.
Right. Okay.
So that could have had something to do with it.
Anyhow, interesting.
So what does everybody like to say? Follow the money?
Yeah. This ought to be interesting. What do you got to say about that?
Well, their old man just died, and he just, remember way back when during a famine, he increased their wealth 100-fold.
Yep.
Or their flocks, whatever you want to say, 100-fold. So who got that? Did it get divided up both ways, 50-50 between the two brothers, or what?
Yeah. I don't know.
See, you're not following the money. I don't know
Okay.
where it's going either, but
But that's what's wrong. All right. Well, I was also thinking back. You remember when after Sarah died and Abraham married again, and he married Keturah, and he had several sons by Keturah, and he gave each of them money and sent them away.
right.
He didn't want them competing with Isaac in the land that Isaac was promised. That doesn't say that the one competing with, yeah. Here it doesn't say that Isaac did the same thing with Esau. It doesn't say Isaac told Esau, look, Esau, your inheritance is over there, get over there.
No, I know. It's reasonable for me to conclude they both had a lot of resources after this death.
Yeah.
I don't know why I wouldn't think that way, but
Well, anyway, there you are. I wish I had some better answers to some of this stuff, but it's a mystery. We'll learn it. We'll learn it when we get there. So anyway, let me read on.
Jerry, one more question.
Sure.
Jacob was more of a shepherd
Yep.
than Esau was.
Yep.
And so he was probably tired of the sheep, and he wanted to do something else, and who knows what it was, but there was something in it that made him do it. And just don't discount the fact that he was the guy that was running around doing all the hunting and whatever else he was doing.
Yep. Well, the land over there in Edom, in Seir, Petra, it's pretty. There's some stuff over there that's pretty cool. Neat canyons and valleys and things like that. But it's not green, really, by any stretch.
well, it's not green now. Who knows what it was like 3,000
Fair
years ago.
point. That's a fair point. Before global warming, you mean? Okay. Anyway, moving right along. Verse 9. This is the account of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife Adah, and Reuel, the son of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Esau's son Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah, who bore him Amalek. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Adah. Now, I want to stop there for just a second, because the main point of going through this list here is that name right there in verse 12. Timnah, concubine named Timnah, who bore him Amalek. Amalek is the father of the Amalekites, and the Amalekites served to be a real thorn in the side of Israel for years and years and years. And this is, someone says, well, who are the Amalekites? The Amalekites are the descendants of Esau. Okay, that's who the Amalekites are. Moving on, verse 13 says, the sons of Reuel, Nahath, Zerah, Shema, and Mizah. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. So these now would not be Canaanites, because Basemath was an Ishmaelite. And the sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah and the granddaughter of Zibeon, whom she bore to Esau, were Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. None of these names that are in that little section, with the exception of Amalek, are any different than the names that were up in the beginning of chapter 36. So they seem to be repeated for whatever reason. Starting with verse 15. These are the chiefs among Esau's descendants. The chiefs of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, chief Teman, Omar, Zephah, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These were the chiefs descended from Eliphaz in Edom. They were the grandsons of Adah. Again, these are the same names that are up there in verse 11 and 12. Verse 17 says, the sons of Esau's son Reuel, chiefs Nahath, Zerah, Shema, and Mizah. These were the chiefs descended from Reuel and Edom. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. Basemath, who was a descendant of Ishmael. Okay, big deal. Verse 18, the sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah were the chiefs Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the chiefs descended from Esau's wife Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah. And these were the sons of Esau, that is, Edom, and their chiefs. So a lot of repetition in there, and you don't know what to think about all of that, but that's a family tree of Esau, if you will. But just when you think you could be done with it, there's another whole page of it, all right? So verse 20 says, these were the sons of Seir the Horite, who were living in the region, okay? Now, the ones we just read about were all Esau's descendants. Esau, who grew up with his brother Jacob and who lived in Canaan with their father and mother Isaac and Rebekah. Okay, now we move over to this whole new group of people. These were the sons of Seir the Horite, who were living in the region. Okay, what region? Well, this region. This is the region over here of Seir. And so the point is these are not anything to do with Esau right now. These are the people that are in the land that Esau is going to end up occupying.
The natives, if you will.
The natives. These are the natives. Right?
So Amalek is the bad dude here, the really bad dude.
Yep.
And he's from the wife that's from Ishmael. Is that right?
That's a good question. Let's see. We can find out real quick.
I thought you mentioned the son.
Eliphaz. No, Eliphaz is the son of Anah, which is Hittite.
Oh, Hittites and
Hittite.
So he's got Hittites, Horites, and Ishmaelites in his genealogy.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, let's read about the natives, as you say, the people that originally were in Seir before Esau decided to go over there. So these were the sons of Seir and the Horite who were living in the region: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishon, and Dishan. These sons of Seir and Edom were Horite chiefs. The sons of Lotan were Hori and Homam. Timnah was Lotan's sister. The sons of Shobal were Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. And the sons of Zibeon were Ai, Anah, and this is the Anah who discovered the hot springs in the desert while he was grazing with the donkeys of his father Zibeon. Like that means something to me. Moving on. The children of Anah were Dishon and Oholibamah, daughter of Anah. And the sons of Dishon were Himdan, Ishban, Ithran, and Karan. And the sons of Ezer, Bilhan, Zavan, and Akan. And the sons of Dishan, Uz, and Aran. These were the Horite chiefs, Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. And these were the Horite chiefs according to their divisions in the land of Seir.
Could you read 24 over?
24. The sons of Zibeon, I can't say that. I think it's Ai, and Anah. This is the Anah who discovered the hot springs.
So in the King James, it says that found the mules in the wilderness
Okay,
as
whatever.
he fed the asses of Zibeon.
Okay, I'll be darned. I don't know what that is. There's two things I noticed about reading that whole thing. First of all, these are like you say, these are the natives of the land of Seir. There are some names that are in common with some of the descendants that were in Esau's line. So it's my supposition that Esau and his descendants intermarried with some of the Horites. And so the two groups kind of mixed. If not, I mean, it could even be as simple as it says here. Verse 22. The sons of Lotan was Hori and Homam. Timnon was Lotan's sister. And over Timnah, over here, if we come back to, I don't know if I want to go all through this, but Timnah was the mother, I believe, of Amalek. Yeah, verse 12. Esau's son Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah who bore him Amalek. So Amalek, I don't even know if that's the same Timnah, but the point I'm trying to make is that there's a fair number of repetition of names that make me think there was some intermarrying between the locals in Edom and Esau. I'll just put it that way.
Is this the first time in verse 24? Is this the first time donkeys are mentioned in the Bible?
Well, I don't know. No. Because when Jacob left Laban, it says he had sheep and camels and donkeys.
Okay.
There were several times where he had donkeys. Okay, let me go on. We'll get through this painful part here. Verse 31. These were the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. Bela, the son of Beor, became king of Edom. His city was named Dinhabah. Then Bela died, and Jobab, the son of Zerah from Basra, succeeded him as king. When Jobab died, Husham from the land of the Temanites succeeded him as king. And when Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, succeeded him as king. The city was named Avith. And when Hadad died, Samlah and Masrekah succeeded him as king. And when Samlah died, Shaul from Rehoboth on the river succeeded him as king. And when Shaul died, Baal-Hanan, son of Achbor, succeeded him as king. And when Baal-Hanan, son of Achbor, died, Hadad succeeded him as king. His city was named Pau, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, and daughter of Me-Zahab. These were the chiefs descended from Esau by name according to their clans and regions: Timnah, Alva, Jetheth, Oholibamah, Elah, Pinon, Kenaz, Timan, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Imran. These were the chiefs of Edom according to their settlements in the land they occupied. This was Esau, the father of the Edomites. So that whole chapter was the genealogy of Esau and the Edomites. And we'll have almost nothing to do with that from now on. So I can't really tell you why it's here, although it is kind of fascinating every now and then that you'll run into some name and you'll find that name back here, and it'll help you tie a couple of things together. Yeah.
Well, I guess the only interesting I can see out of it is it happens before Jacob's.
Yes.
Now, technically, he's older than, or as far as who was born first.
Technically, who is?
Esau's older than Jacob, so
Okay.
they're doing it. I mean, they're twins, but
Yeah.
who was born first? I don't know.
Okay. Well, the Edomites become a, I mean, they're a problem. They're part of the equation all the way through into the New Testament, right? Who's the New Testament Edomite that you know of? Herod the Great. Herod the Great was an Edomite. The Romans called them Idumeans. Idumeans are Edomites. So, and then David had problems with the Edomites. You know, David, when he was busy doing his messing around, the Edomites pestered him and bothered him. And so, you were talking about it in the Exodus, when the Israelites came around the south and were heading up the north, then they came to Edom. God told them, don't raise an arm against the Edomites because they're your brothers. And the Israelites said, we'd like to go through your land. We'll pay you for the water, and we'll pay you for what our flocks eat. And the Edomites said, no. And so the Israelites again said, now listen, we won't do anything wrong. We'll stay right on the path, and we'll pay you for the water, and we'll pay you for the feed. And the Edomites said, no. And so they made them go all the way around so that they wouldn't go through their land. So, not the friendliest of groups, I would say. Kind of an awkward place to stop, but I don't want to start because the next thing we do, as you just said, chapter 37 starts the account of Jacob's genealogy. And so rather than start that, since we only have 5 more minutes, I thought I'd let you decide or see if there's any questions or anything you want to talk about. We'll start with, this next part is kind of the end of the book of Genesis, and it's all about Joseph. The central character from chapter 37 on is Joseph. Not that Jacob doesn't play an important role, but it's basically Joseph. Yeah.
Did the Edomites realize that they were related to the people in the Exodus coming out? Did they know that?
That's a good question. Some of them, the answer is not all of them, but some of them might. I don't know enough about, let's see. In order for them to know that, they would have to, number one, be interested in things of God, which I imagine most of them weren't. They'd have to not be particularly captivated by pagan culture and pagan ritual stuff. I bet some of them did. I bet you some of them did. I tell you a famous Edomite that we know that knew of them, and that was Ruth, right? Because Ruth was, she was an Edomite, I guess. I think, right? Moab. That's all right. I'll tell you what you'll find is over here on this side, you got Edom. It says right there, Edom. I can get my finger to work. That says Edom. And you got Moab. And then you got Ammon. So the Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites are all right here. Now, if you remember, Edom comes from Esau, who was the brother of Jacob. Moab was the offspring of Lot and one of his daughters, and Ammon was the offspring of Lot and the other of his daughters. So all 3 of those people groups, if you will, have connections to Abraham. This is really interesting, isn't it? Who would have thought all that? And all of it condensed in this little stuff here. Yeah.
So they all point back to Abraham. Well, Lot. Yeah, Lot.
Well,
does
Abraham's
by uncle, I guess.
Yeah. Abraham's family.
Right. So when God says to Abraham, and through you all the nations will be blessed, and that's got sent down to Jacob now, right?
Mm-hmm.
His job is to at least attempt to be a blessing to all these other guys.
Yep.
Right? Because they're all kinfolk.
Yep. That's exactly right.
That's how I would look at it.
Yep. That's exactly right. I look at it that way too. Okay. Let me close in prayer. Father God, thank you for the discussion. It was fun. There's a lot of questions we have. We know, again, that one of these days we'll be able to fill in the blanks and it'll be great. In the meantime, help us to just think about the questions. They don't have to go away, but to realize that the main gist of what you want us to do is to read your Torah, understand your Torah the best we can, and to be obedient to it the best we can. To realize that by being called by you and by being obedient to you and by identifying as members of the covenant that we have with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that our job is to be your representatives to the rest of humanity. And I'd ask that you guide us in that way. Help us to realize that that's the path that you've chosen for us, and help us to trust in you and to be obedient. Keep us safe until we meet again next week. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, thanks very much.